everyone, welcome to Ranmalee Teacher's History class. Today we are going to start the grade 9 lessons. Now I have already uploaded grade 6 to grade 11 lessons. If you would like to join to my classes, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon and leave a comment. Those comments are very valuable to me and it will be a good encouragement for me. Right. Capture of the coastal areas of Sri Lanka by the Dutch. After the arrival of Portuguese to Sri Lanka, the relation of the Kenyan king and the Portuguese were very aggressive. The Kenyan king realized that they need naval power in order to chase away the Portuguese from our country. King Rajasingha too sought the support of the Dutch to drive away the Portuguese from our country. After driving away the Portuguese, the Dutch broke the agreement that had been entered into the Kenyan king and went on to establish their power in many areas that had previously been captured by the Portuguese. In 1658, they had established a Dutch rule in coastal areas of Sri Lanka. Dutch ruled those areas until 1796. In this lesson, we are going to discuss the establishment of Dutch rule in the coastal areas of Sri Lanka and the nature of the relationship maintained in between Dutch and the Kenyan kingdom. The features of political, economic, cultural affairs during the rule of Dutch in coastal areas. Arrival of Dutch in Asia. In 16th century, the Dutch were engaged in trade of buying some commodities at Lisbon harbour in Portugal, the spices and the other commodities that were brought by Portuguese from Asia. Holland was the motherland of the Dutch. That time it was a colony of Spain. The Spanish were Roman Catholic and the Dutch were Protestants. There existed religious conflicts in between two nations. The Dutch began to rebel against the Spanish for winning their independence. At that time, Prince Philip II, who became the King of Spain, also he inherited the kingship of Portugal and got the opportunity to work against the Dutch. King Philip II prohibited the Dutch to arrive to the Lisbon harbour. At that time, Dutch ships could not enter to the Lisbon harbour. In order to the Dutch to get spices and other commodities they needed for their trade, they had no any other idea to reach Asia looking for spices and such commodities they needed. So you can see the Holland, nowadays it is known as Netherlands. It is the motherland of Dutch. This is the map of Europe. You can see the Portugal and the Spain. Here the Netherlands. So Spanish has invaded this Netherlands at that time. This is the King Philip II. or the Prince Philip II. So this Prince Philip II became the king of Portugal and Spain at that time. The Portuguese had taken steps to prevent the knowledge about the sea routes to the Asia from the beginning. Passed to another European nation. During that period, they did not allow a single Dutch, English or French nations to go to Asia. By about 1595, various ways and other trade routes were founded by Dutch. Dutch trade companies had arrived in Asia by year 1602. Dutch ruler formed the Dutch East India Trade Company or the VOC Company in 1602. According to the royal maintained of this company, it was granted powers to engage trade activities in Asia, behalf of the Dutch government to conquer areas, to build fortresses, to appoint governors and to rule the relevant areas. After 1602, the VOC Company grew financially stable and the Dutch were able to send very powerful fleets of ships to Asia. The Dutch established their headquarters in Batavia in Java Islands and established their power in the islands in the East Asia and in several locations in the coastal areas of India. You can see the VOC logo. So this is the logo they use for their trade company established in East India. So I told you now this Kenyan kingdom, Kenyan kings realized they don't have any naval power at that time. So they thought to seek help from the Dutch. In 1602, the Dutch admiral named Joris van Slippenberg reached to the eastern coast of Sri Lanka with the 3 ships and landed at Batticaloa. He then went to the Kenyan area where he met the King Vimaladharma Surya I. In July 1602, at that time, King Vimaladharma Surya had been highly disappointed. You can see the Dutch admiral van Slippenberg with the King Vimaladharma Surya I. Because this King Vimaladharma Surya was disappointed with the activities of the Portuguese at that time, because time to time Portuguese invade the Kenyan kingdom. King agreed to get assistance of the Dutch to drive away the Portuguese from our country. About 3 months after the Slippenberg had left, Dutch captain named Syllabus de Wert met King Vimaladharma Surya I. The king had discussions with him about the manner as to how the two parties should act in order to drive the Portuguese from our country. At later occasion, Syllabus de Wert spoke to king in disrespectful manner, which led to dispute between Syllabus and king's men. This dispute resulting in the unfortunate death of the Syllabus de Wert. King's people killed this Syllabus de Wert. King had to give up his hopes of getting support of Dutch at that time. After King Vimaladharma Surya won, his brother Senarath became the king. King Senarath had discussions with the Dutch, but those discussions are not successful. The treaty between King Rajasingha II and the Dutch. After the reign of King Senarath, his son ascended the throne as King Rajasingha II. He is a very mighty person. He was strongly determined to drive away the Portuguese from our country. He took action to get support of the Dutch, who had strong naval power. He had discussions with the eastern headquarters of the Dutch in Batavia. The king agreed to give Dutch ownership of the cinnamon trade in Sri Lanka and also harbours in the eastern coast of Sri Lanka in return of the support they would give him to drive away the Portuguese from our country. The objectives of the king in doing so was not all to bring another European nation in place of one already present in the country. The king's army, together with the Dutch, surrounded the Portuguese fortress in Batiklo. After launching several attacks on Portuguese, the troops succeeded in driving Portuguese away from the fortresses. The king delighted with those activities and he entered to the agreement with the Dutch in the month of May 1638. So you can see the treaty at that time, this Kenyan kingdom and the coastal areas, how they are going to divide, now already divided. The key points of the Treaty of the 1638. The Dutch agreeing to support the King of Kandy to drive away the Portuguese from our country. Second one, the king agreeing to settle by the way of providing the Dutch with the commodities such as cinnamon, pepper and beaver wax for the amount that the Dutch would spend on the battles against the Portuguese. So as money, they have exchanged goods as the war cost at that time. Granting the Dutch the monopoly means the ownership of the collecting commodities from the Kenyan areas except for elephants. Agreeing to deploy means to put, if the king wishes to do so, the Dutch army at the fortresses that would be captured from the Portuguese. After the treaty had been signed in 1638, it took 20 more years to drive away the Portuguese from our country. Dutch and the Kenyan army went on capturing Portuguese fortresses in Trincomalee, Negombo, Kalutara, Colombo, Mannar and Jaffna and other fortresses that were under the Portuguese power. After the fortresses in Trincomalee, Negombo had been captured, there arose conflicts between king and the Dutch. Dutch did not take steps to hand over those fortresses to the king, which was the violation of the agreement. One clue of 1638 treaty, Dutch army may be deployed in fortresses captured from the Portuguese only if the king of the Kenyan kingdom wished to do so, but the Dutch acted forgetting that clause. As cinnamon gave in evidence in the Nigambo and the gold areas, the Dutch did not hand over those areas to the king. Because of this, the king refused to pay salaries of the workers employed those fortresses, saying that it was not responsibility of the king. Dutch said they could not hand over the fortresses until king paid the amount they demanded in order to cover the expenses of the battle they had fought. Right, now look at this Sri Lankan map. So in dark blue you can see the coastal area of Sri Lanka captured by Portuguese. Now already Dutch have captured lot of harbours. And this is the area of the, in light blue, this is the area of the Kenyan kingdom. So you can see the harbours, Trincomalee Harbour, Batticaloa, Colombo, Nigambo, Goal. So there are a lot of natural harbours in Sri Lanka. Mannar. However, King Rajasingha too acted very patiently as he needed further support of the Dutch to capture the coastal area from the Portuguese and the other fortresses, including the Colombo fort. So down you can see the Gold fort, not the Colombo fort. A huge Dutch army arrived in Sri Lanka, headed by general named Railroad Holt. Dutch army surrounded the Colombo fort in order to capture it from the Portuguese. King was very happy and sent huge army to join the Dutch army and chase away the Portuguese from the Colombo fort. But when the Dutch captured the Colombo fort, they did not hand over the Colombo fort to king. The Portuguese became very helpless, and at that time Dutch and they have hand over the keys to Dutch and vanished from the Colombo fort. The Dutch, who had so far been carrying out their operations from the Gold fort, made Colombo fort as their headquarters. This was another incident where the Dutch broke the agreement in 1638. In 1658, the Dutch captured the Mannar, then the Jaffna fort, putting the Portuguese rule in the coastal area to the end. After the king had realized that the aim of the Dutch had been establishment of their own power in the coastal areas, which had been under the Portuguese rule, the king implemented a strategy in order to minimize the areas that Dutch could capture. Accordingly, the king took steps to attack the Kenyan kingdom, many areas that had been under the Portuguese rule and would now be acquired by the Dutch. Because of the king's strategy, the extent of the areas that Dutch could acquire was smaller than the extent of the areas that had been captured by the Portuguese. However, since a similar European nation was brought to the country in place of the Portuguese, there created a Sinhala proverb, Inguru Dila Miris Kattage, which means an act like exchanging ginger for chili, because these Dutch were more cunning and more dangerous than Portuguese. Relationship of the Dutch with the Kenyan Kingdom. Out of the three European nations, Portuguese, the Dutch and the English, Dutch who maintained healthy relationship with the Kenyan Kingdom for the longest period. The policy that the Portuguese adopted towards Kenyan Kingdom was very aggressive. The English captured the Kenyan Kingdom even before a period of 2 decades. But the Dutch maintained peaceful relation with the Kenyan Kingdom from the 1658 to 1796 by the way of mission of exchanging communication. Relationship between King Rajasingha II and the Dutch. King Rajasingha II brought in the Dutch during the period of 1638 to 1658. The areas that the Dutch captured from the Portuguese were not handed over to the king. Relationship between King Rajasingha II and the Dutch. King Rajasingha II brought the Dutch to drive away the Portuguese from our country. The time period from 1638 to 1658. The areas that the Dutch captured from Portuguese were not handed over to the king as agreed, leading conflicts between two parties. Dutch policies in this country during the period from 1658 to 1675 did not have any understanding of the power of the Kenyan Kingdom. With the intention of surrounding the Kenyan Kingdom on the land and by the sea, the Dutch captured several areas in the eastern and western coast which had been under the Kenyan Kingdom. King Rajasingha II was being silent about such invasions by the Dutch. Began to attack Dutch on all sides after the year 1670. The fact that the Dutch lost almost all the areas that they had captured after year 1658 shows how powerful, how the immediate attacks that the Kenyan army. King Rajasingha II's army helped the Dutch to gain the proper understanding of the war power of the Kenyan Kingdom and also to formulate their future policy towards the Kenyan Kingdom. After these attacks, the Dutch realized the Kenyan armies were capable for fighting against them face to face on land. As a result, the Dutch took steps to deal with the Kenyan king, showing them respect and fear, to maintain peaceful relationships with the Kenyan kingdom as far as possible. Kenyan-Dutch diplomatic relations. Diplomatic means political relations. Dutch from the time to time Kenyan-Dutch diplomatic relationships. Diplomatic relationship means political relationships. From the time of King Vimaldamasuriya I, during the reign of Rajasingha II, at least 8 Dutch emissaries had met him from time to time. During the King Rajasingha II, General Greyroth Holt meeting King Rajasingha II in 1656 was the most significant. By this time, Portuguese had not been driven from the country. Dutch emissary who went to Kenyan on invitation of the king was welcomed by the king with the great respect. It has been stated in record of the Dutch that the general was extorted to the king in colourful possession. The king too, respect Holt had extended to him. After King Rajasingha II, reign of King Vimaldamasuriya II, King Veeraparakama Narendra and Sri Vijayarajasingha II, during this period, diplomatic relationships were organized on occasions where the conflicts arose between the king and the Dutch, and when the relationship between the two parties were not in good manner. On most of the occasions that representatives of the king too visited to the Low Country and met the Dutch leaders and had some meetings. During diplomatic relationships, the two parties exchanged gifts and showed cordiality and listening to the requests made by each other, discussing the issues that affected to the two parties were given prominence. So you can see the gift exchanged by the king and the Dutch. Gifts given to the king by the Dutch emissary. Flag taken from the Portuguese, 2 horses, 2 sets of Persian bows and arrows, sandalwood timber, 2 Persian sheep and several other animals. So those are the gifts given by the Dutch to king. So king have given very valuable gifts to the Dutch, a gold chain, a ring, a shoe holder made of gold. So at that time we can understand king had a lot of gold. Dutch governor and the king rarely met each other. Such diplomatic relationships and exchange communications were very important in bringing the views of two parties together. When the King Rajasingha II sent written communications to the Dutch, he referred himself as the Emperor of Sri Lanka. The Dutch in return stated Sri Sinhaladishwara at least nominally when referring to the king in their communications. When king wrote the letters to the Dutch, he referred to them with the phrases such as "Dear Dutchman, at my service," and the Dutch closed the letter they wrote to the king with the phrases such as "Your obedient servant." The following table gives some important information about the meeting that several Dutch emissaries had with the king. So you can see time to time kings who ascended the throne and the Dutch envoy who kept relation with the king and the objectives of these relationships. 1602, King Viveldharma I, the Dutch envoy Joris van Slippenberg, discussing about commercial activities. Those are the objectives they had. In 1656, King Rajasingha II, General Greyrood Holst, invasion to meet the king and discussing the issues the two parties were faced with. So at that time they discussed to invade the Portuguese fortresses. 1688, King Viveldharma II, Colin Albers, discussing new agreements between the king and the Dutch. 1721, King Veeraparakram Narendra, Colonelus Tackle, offering condolence of the Dutch over the death of the king's queen. So those are the objectives and the discussions kept by king and the Dutch emissary. Peace policy and avoiding conflicts. After King Rajasingha II, in 1687, his son ascended the throne as King Viveldharma II. King Viveldharma II protected the kingdom that was inherited from his father and also maintained friendly relationship with the Dutch. Some of the measures taken by the two parties are following. First one, providing Dutch ships to bring Upasampada Bhikkhu to Sri Lanka. So at that time, Viveldharma II kept higher ordination. That means Upasampada. So Dutch helped to bring bhikkhus from the other countries like Burma. Lifting the ban that had been imposed on Dutch to peel cinnamon in Pitigala Korale. So King have banned King Rajasingha have banned these Dutch to peel the cinnamon from the Pitigala Korale. So this King Viveldharma II have lifted that ban. Third one, Dutch company agreed to buy king's cinnamon, areca nuts and elephants. After King Viveldharma II, his son Veeraparakama Narendra became the king. He had been very famous as Prince Hundasari. During this period, there occurred several incidents that led gradual deterioration of the peaceful relationship that had been maintained with the Dutch. The king took steps to engage in more trade by sending areca nuts, elephants, ivory to India through the Kalpiti and the Puttalam harbour. The Dutch, who considered this to be a great loss, and they closed all the harbours and disputed this incident, make a disputed the trade activities of the Kenyan kingdom. I hope you enjoy and gain knowledge from this lesson. We will start the next lesson from lesson 1.2. Thank you.